Hi, I'm Jim Shaw, back with another segment of Coffee with the Candidates. Today I'm with Matthew Cohen, who is seeking a seat on the Board of Selectmen. There's a one-year seat that's due to the vacancy created by Michelle Socolo, who has been elected to the state legislature. So she's leaving a seat. Her re-election would be next year, I think. So correct, there is a vacancy, and that needs to be filled. Today, we have Matt with us, and to tell you a little bit about Matt, he's a PhD. He has that, he earned a PhD from Northeastern, a master's degree from Harvard University, and of course, undergrad from Brandeis. He was in the town manager's office. He was a management intern full-time between the time he was in high school and college. You were on the Human Services Committee here at Lexington at one point, and you served 7 years as a State House Research and Budget Director. So it sounds
like me.
It sounds like you. It sure does. I remember going through this last time, and I'm sorry you didn't make it. But,
thank you, Al. I'm
glad we're having this conversation.
Me too, Misha. I'm sure Representative Socolo will do a great job. So,
I'm sure she will.
Yeah.
I wanted to add, if I didn't add, you're a college professor in political science at Merrimack College.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Comparative politics and research methods. Those are my areas of focus, things. One of them no one likes to teach. No one likes research methods, but I do. So
well, that's great.
That shows you what works, what
somebody
doesn't.
has to do it.
Exactly.
So we were talking a little bit about, before we started the taping here, one of your big issues, in fact, you said it was your biggest issue, was the issue of affordability.
Absolutely.
And I think I can understand that because, you know, I come from a family, you know, I'm multiple generations like you. You're fourth. You have 4 generations of your family. Your children are the 4th?
Yes.
And I have the same. My son is the 4th of the generation to live in Lexington. And, you know, when I watched my mom, after my dad died, the affordability issue was really pretty clear for us too. We saw the impact of it. So tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are in terms of affordability and how you think you can, you know, help ease that burden.
Absolutely. So, you know, it's a great community to live in, lots of services, and that's all great, but it's only great if people can afford to live here. So we don't want to be driving out. You know, people who've spent their entire lives here in town. You know, I plan on living the rest of my life in this town. I'm not going anywhere. So I'm hoping maybe my kids want to come back. Maybe we can get a 5th, 6th generation here in Lexington. But you know, the expense of living here is quite high to pay for, you know, everything that we do get. And you know, I think there's a couple things we can do there. So I've got a lot of experience. You know, as you noted, research and budget director at the State House, management intern here in town, and I've gotten to see the budget here in town and at the state level, and it's a very important thing to me. You know, we all got to pay our taxes, but we can't waste that money. We have to be very careful with how we spend tax dollars, so that we're really focused on the things that work and eliminating the things that don't. You know, when I look at a budget, I always ask a few questions of it. I start with, one, do we actually need this program? Because, you know, everyone always thinks so, but maybe we don't. So it's important to examine, do we actually need this program? And if we do, we should always then be looking at, well, does it actually work? And again, if the answer is yes, great. But then you still have a third question to ask, which is, can we do this for less money? You know, is there a way to save some money here? You know, we gotta find ways to do that, because we shouldn't be increasing taxes every time that, you know, every year. You know, there should be a way to sort of stabilize this, and reducing taxes will be difficult. I'll be honest, I don't know that there's a way to do that, but you know, I'm pleased that we don't have overrides as often as we used to. That's something I would really like to continue. You know, we should live with the budget that we've got, set appropriately. But I think another issue with that too, and it's something that we were talking about, you know, before we got started here too, which is in the past, about, was it 25, 30% of the town's revenue came from commercial development.
Right.
And now it's down to 10, 15% on a yearly basis. And someone has to make up that difference, and the answer is it's you.
Right.
It's me. It's the 4 generations that are here. So it impacts everyone, and that's particularly hard on people on a fixed income, be it because they're retired, be it from disability, for whatever reason. There's that fixed income. I do believe that we do need to increase commercial property so that we can gain that revenue, which will help offset.
Okay, when you say increase commercial property, what do you?
Yes.
Be more specific. I know we've got proposed development changes for Hartwell Avenue again.
Yes.
That look like it's in the offing, a mixed-use plan that may be coming forward. What's your vision for that? And when you say we need to sort of bridge that gap between the 15% it is now and the 25% it used to be, how do we get back there? That's a significant jump, and it's not going to happen overnight. But
Absolutely
where
not.
do we start?
So, where do we start is tough. But so to answer that more generally, then I'll get to those two specifics. Yeah. But I think one thing that Lexington has a reputation that we are not all that friendly to businesses. There are vacant properties here in Lexington right now on Hayden Ave. I see that I drive down there after I drop my son off at preschool. I drive to work and I see that there's vacant property. And part of the reason why is we're known for being, I don't want to say hostile, but it's not a business-friendly climate. Indifferent maybe. Yeah, that's a good word. Yeah. So I think we need to change that. We don't want to become Burlington. We don't need to become Burlington.
Certainly, yeah.
That's not the goal. There's an in-between. There's always a middle path for these kinds of things. And to my mind, part of that step is revitalizing Lexington Center, which more interesting businesses, making this a business-friendly sort of, or at least business-interested community.
Can I just stop you for one second?
Absolutely.
I have heard other communities, because we have, like the tavern spot's been open for a long time. When Cohen's left, that space went empty for a few years before it was developed into Panera and all of that, which turned out to be a wonderful situation for the town.
Agreed.
But what do we do? Is there a way to sort of hold landlords' feet to the fire in terms of keeping properties open? The old Caldwell Banker spot is open and has been open for a while. We have banks that want to come in, and I understand there's a sort of like disdain for banks in the center. But what about penalizing a landlord for keeping the property open? They're doing that in some communities now.
Absolutely.
As sort of an aggressive way to make sure that the landlords aren't sitting on property because maybe the rent is paid. I mean, I don't know for a fact, but I've heard that rents in some of the open spots are being paid by old leaseholders. So the landlord is being paid, so there's no incentive to go look. So what do you think about that?
So I think we have to design it carefully. You don't want to set penalties so high that no one's willing to even own the property.
Yeah. No, I'm saying as a concept, though.
But as a concept, yes. I do support that sort of concept. And we need to encourage small, local independent businesses. Right. I think that's the most interesting thing. I remember growing up here. There were lots of interesting stores in Lexington Center, and there still are now. And there are a bunch of interesting stores, but you walk around Concord, you walk around Belmont, Winchester. Those are much more interesting town centers. To the question, they're not all banks. Right. They have other things than banks. Right. And
Concord said, they said no banks years ago. Middlesex is, I think, the only bank that's in the center. And to be somewhat fair, their shops are a little smaller.
Yes.
So the square footage sort of creates a little bit more affordability.
Absolutely.
I think if you look at the per square foot cost, they may be on par. I'm not entirely sure.
I don't know. Yes,
but you're absolutely right. The affordability of the rents in the center is an issue. I have several friends who are landlords in the center of town. They're really nice people, but they're business people.
Well, sure, yes.
So everybody's in business, and a healthy economy in the center helps everybody. Landlords, the community, and so on and so forth.
Town government, it helps everybody.
Leads into the center streetscape. It's sort of the next, logical place to go here. What do you think about that? I mean, I know there's been a struggle that's been going on for 10 years. It's finally in town meeting. You know, I think it's going to finally go, and I don't know if they've actually come to. I know that the plan that's going to town meeting includes the brick and all of that. I don't know if the folks from the handicap committee, the disability committee, will bring their issue or concern to town meeting and maybe amend it or try to. Where do you stand on the whole issue in terms of? And I don't want to go back to bricks and all of that, but.
No,
I think it's going to be part of the conversation when it goes to town meeting.
I assume it will be as well.
Yeah.
And
so,
you know, to my mind, you know, we do need to redo Lexington Center. The bricks that are there now, I mean, it's hard for me to walk on those bricks. I can't imagine if you're in a wheelchair, if you have a vision problem, a walker, you know, or any other sort of issue like that, you can't get around, and that's unreasonable. You know, it's totally unreasonable. This needs to be in a town that is accessible to everybody. And all of our residents should be able to get around. So I'm very pleased that we are making progress on that. I know for the specifics of the proposal, I like the wire cut brick idea. That seems to be a good sort of compromise, sort of way to go. And so I'm in favor of that idea. There's lots of other details to the plan that we can get into, but the more general principle is we should always be designing things with that accessibility in mind, but also understanding sort of the aesthetic side, you know, keeping both in mind. There are ways, you know, it goes back to the point before. There's always some way there's always a deal that can be made, a compromise that can be reached that will end up with sort of a reasonable middle ground where everybody will get something they need.
Striking some balance.
Exactly, and this seems to be a good way. I think that, you know, it took a long time to do this, unfortunately, and I think it could have been done faster, and it could have been done for less money, but the overall end result, I think, is going to be a good thing.
Right.
And I would be supportive of that.
And if we kick the can down the road even further,
it'll make it worse.
It'll make it more expensive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we need to get, you know, town staff working on this now. We need to get this done.
Okay.
Because the longer we wait, as you said, the more expensive it gets, and that goes against everything I believe about budgeting. So.
Right. Okay. And I understand the next series of questions we're going to ask you really aren't necessarily policy-wise,
sure,
but certainly financially will impact the Board of Selectmen, schools. Okay, we've just made major investments in our schools over at Mariah Hastings, and we need a new high school. There's a lot there that we really need to focus on. So, what are your priorities for working maybe with the school committee or other, you know, committees in town that are impacted or involved with decision making relative to the schools? Absolutely.
So schools to me are of critical importance. You know, I'm the only candidate whose kids would go through a new high school. You know, it's not a policy question for me, you're right. It's a personal investment to me because I've got a kid still in preschool. So it matters to me very much. And school policy, of course, as you were sort of noting, was really the purview of school committee. But that doesn't mean we can't talk. And so I see the job of everyone in town, on these boards, through town meeting, the committees, elected or not, as collaboration. We need to work together. And I very much would like to be doing that. And I want to work closely with school committee. You know, we determine in part the budget, and I want to listen to their requests. I want to work with them, see, you know, again, where can we actually save money? But we should never, I always want to make sure schools are properly funded. It's one of the biggest appeals of Lexington as well. It's one of the reasons that I want to keep living here and hope my kids come back and live here. So we got to maintain those schools. And as for the high school, we do, as you said, need a new high school. I was there pretty recently, and it's not overwhelmingly different than when I graduated in 1999. So it's you know, could use an update and maybe a better design, especially taking into, you know, safety considerations. Separate buildings makes no sense. For that type of design. That's a weather consideration too, makes no sense. But
I think they called it a California campus or something.
I think that's right.
We're just basically outside in the middle of winter. If it's inclement, you walk under the little overhead
which
paths.
Is still pretty cold. I remember walking through those. So
still very cold.
Yeah, I don't think we look a lot like California. So it's seems a mistake. But we definitely have to rebuild that school, and that'll be expensive. And we should start planning now. You know, before we should be saving money for the school now, because that money will grow in value if we start putting it aside. And it'll help us offset the cost in the long run. So I, goes to a basic budgeting question. I've spent my life working on budgets, and I know that there are solutions here for the high school that can help within that budget.
Okay. Something a little bit more controversial.
Sure.
Recently in town meeting, National Development came to Lexington with a request to develop a senior residence community up along Watertown Street.
Near where I live. Yeah.
And the neighbors were quite concerned about it. They brought their concerns forward, and town meeting voted initially in favor of the residents, then under reconsideration changed their vote and went with National Development. And I said this in a previous interview that I just had a few minutes ago with Robert Cohen. I was a little bit skeptical of the project myself. I couldn't help but focus on the fact that it seemed like a bailout for the Belmont Country Club. And I thought there was more concern. There was not enough concern placed on not enough emphasis placed on the concerns of the residents up there. It's hard. We have to balance the need for income in this community because we are spending and we are moving forward. We have a high school, we have a police station to build.
Yep, absolutely.
So these things have to be, we have to look at these sources of revenue. So what is your thought of the whole thing after, sort of, and I'm not trying to lead you into a certain position. I'm just trying to get your thought in terms of how do we balance the needs of the neighbors versus the need for revenue, and how we hold these developers accountable to pay what they should be paying to the town.
Absolutely. So it actually ties back as well to, I never actually answered on Hayden or Hartwell.
Go ahead.
So for all these projects, we need to be looking at the broader impact. Lexington has a certain character. We don't want to disrupt neighborhoods. That has to be taken into consideration.
Right.
But at the same time, we do have to be looking at that usable land. So, for this particular project, however one may feel about it, I think that overall, it was probably the right thing to do, but not the way that it was done. And I think that goes the whole way down this process, to be honest. But in the end, the project that we got, as you're noting, did not fully address really the concerns of the neighbors and of the abutting streets. I'm not far away from there either, and I had concerns myself. And I wish more of those had been taken into consideration. I think, too, the town did not get the best deal it possibly could. And that's disappointing. Because
and that's based on, go ahead, based on,
so,
because I know where you're going with this.
Yes, so partially affordable housing.
Well, no, it's based on the fact that other communities,
exactly,
every other community got a better deal.
Well, exactly, and that's
every, not some, but every.
Every other community. Well, I completely agree, and that just looking at the affordable housing question, every other community got a higher percentage.
Right.
Why didn't we? We should have. It's not the. This goes back actually to what I do for a living, which is comparative politics. I would spend my time looking at how has this project been done elsewhere?
Right.
What can we possibly get out of this? The amount of money that they're giving us at the start to offset costs. Other towns did better.
Right.
We can do that. We have the capacity to do that. So my focus will be on getting Lexington the best deal we possibly can. It's what I'm trained to do. And this project as an idea, I think was probably smart. It also presents no increase in school-age children, so there's no increase in the sort of school population, the cost there. Right. But I don't think we did it correctly. And again, I don't wish to criticize anybody in particular for that. These are hardworking, good people, but we could have done better. And I think my background, which would be a unique background on here, I am, my whole career is in government. My whole educational training is in government. My dissertation is on how countries can make better policy. So this is what I want to come here and do and put that to use for Lexington. And the same for Hartwell.
I was going to say, let's follow up with that because we do, this is talk about mixed-use development along Hartwell. And
absolutely.
So, are we going to actually move that forward? I think it makes a lot of sense what they're talking about in terms of the usage of, sort of introducing maybe some retail housing and others, so mixed-use development, your thoughts?
Absolutely. So what to do with Hartwell and Hayden as well are interesting questions. So I like the idea of mixed use, sort of development in the Hartwell area. It has a traffic component that will increase as well, and so we have to take that into consideration. I've been meeting with people to discuss how do you mitigate that, and it'll be tricky, but it does seem there is a path forward. And I think the mixed use is an appealing option because it sort of creates, the Third Ave in Burlington. Now, again, we don't want to be Burlington, but
but Third Ave is pretty interesting. I mean,
it is interesting,
right?
Yeah.
Because it does seem that Waxy O'Connor's works. People do go there.
Yeah.
It's taken a while for it to catch on the way it has. But I do think, I don't know that we want to be Third Ave, but maybe a mini Third Ave or something.
Yes, exactly.
But I think we want to bring something, in order to bring the companies in there, we've got to give them something more than Waxy's. Right.
Agreed. And the other question too is, actually the type of development matters very much that we do in terms of the revenue that we bring back as a result. So the type of commercial development that brings the most revenue to the town is actually lab space. So, especially along Hayden, where there is additional land, there is additional room, we should be encouraging, especially too because a lot of people in Lexington work in fields like that. More people come to Lexington during the day than leave. So we know how to encourage people to be working here.
Right.
It's good for the environment. It's good for the town. We keep all the revenue.
That's great. And companies like Shire, now Takeda, I mean, they've been very active in our community.
Yes, absolutely.
Jay Benson, who is a Lexington resident and a senior manager over at Takeda, is on the Chamber of Commerce board. So I mean, they do engage in a very profound way. So it's nice to be able to do that.
Absolutely, and I want to see that kind of development too.
Okay, we're going to be winding down, and I wanted to ask you, is there anything that you wanted to talk about before I ask you to sort of make a closing statement? Is there anything that we missed that you wanted to make a point on?
Sure, well, I think it's important to discuss environmental policy.
Right.
So, I think in the end, obviously, I don't think that anyone running for this seat is going to differ majorly on environmental policy. It's a question of, who can implement it. I think we need, again, going back to questions of the high school, questions of how do we save and produce revenue, solar paneling.
Right.
It's an easy way to go. I think this is critical for everything. Efficient HVAC systems. Building that sustainability in is something that will be a high focus because it has a dual benefit. And I've seen this firsthand from my time working on budgets at the governmental level, which is that you can both save the environment and generate revenue for your community. And we should be doing that wherever we possibly can. No new designs should be considered. Right. Without that, including things like over at on Watertown Street, Hayden, Hartwell. There we go. Hartwell, the other one. Yes, they're the major ones. We should be looking at that. There's buildings in East Lexington that are privately owned. Perhaps solar paneling can be development there and solar panels. We've got to keep that environmental factor in mind at all times. Make it easier for people with electric cars, charging stations, things like that. So that sustainability factor.
There are more charging. I mean, I see more Teslas and others around town. I know we have some charging stations over in the area that behind the Edison building. In the municipal lot there, but I think there should be more. I agree.
Absolutely, and I got a 2001 car right now, looking to just love that car, but falling apart. So I'll be looking.
Time to go electric.
Do it. You got to live personally and policy-wise.
Since you brought up environmental issues, I know there's an initiative coming to town meeting to ban plastic straws, plastic cutlery, things of that nature. It's not necessarily the same group, but akin to the group that came for the plastic bags that passed with the support last year of Chamber of Commerce. And again, I'm full disclosure, I am a board member of the Chamber of Commerce. And so the ban on plastic straws seems to be a little bit more broad. And what do you think about that?
I like the idea. There is a complication with it, which is, and I've talked with, so I've been heavily engaged with communities for children with disabilities. And they've noted that a plastic straw ban poses problems for them because sometimes that's the only way that people with disabilities can drink. And so say you forget a straw, say you don't have one with you, for whatever reason it drops and something happens to it. Well, what do you do now? So I do think there must be a solution to this, and I think we need to find it because plastic straws are an environmental disaster. We we need to be moving and finding ways to get rid of them. But we have to do it very carefully. And it goes back again to the center streetscape, accessibility, making sure everyone has what they need. You know, we have to be cognizant and really focused on making sure that people with disabilities who need that sort of thing aren't being disadvantaged. So I like the idea, but executing that policy needs to be thought through very carefully to protect people who need that protection.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm going to ask you to make a closing statement. Not so formally, but just tell the folks in Lexington why you think you will serve the community better on the Board of Selectmen. Absolutely.
So, I'm running for this race. This is something I've always wanted to do: is to give back and to serve. As we've discussed, have had 4 generations, now 3 generations in town. I understand the needs of all the people in this town. I've knocked on over 10,000 doors, in the course of the last year, getting to know this community and all the needs of the different people. I'm prepared to do this job. I think one of the biggest issues we face right now is that issue of affordability, is that sort of ability for people to really stay here. A lot of people come here to get their kids through school and want to stay and find it difficult. We need to make sure tax dollars are spent wisely. And I'm the candidate who has that kind of experience, who's done this, lived that firsthand. And in addition to that, I bring a different voice to the board than what's on there. So I would be the only candidate with children in elementary school, or only board member with children in elementary school and in preschool. So it gives us a voice that isn't there right now. There's no one in that situation, sort of that young working family with children very young children in the schools. And I think that a community works best when we have that wide range of voices. So in the end, I want to put my experience to use for Lexington. I've spent my life learning to do this, from my education, a PhD in political science, to my career, working in every level of government, local, state, and federal. So I love Lexington, and I'm hoping to get to serve you, and I ask for your vote on Monday, March 4th. And thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. Excellent.
Thank you.